Hi, welcome. It's MC of Healthy by George. I'm so excited today because I'm joined by my brother, the wonderful nurse practitioner who has over 30 years of experience in primary care and health and wellness. And I just can't tell you how much it's excited to talk to you today. Please think about subscribing. We'd love to see you here every Thursday and Sunday. And so welcome, my brother. Thank you so
Thank you,
much
Mary
for joining
Catherine.
me
Thank you for
again.
having me again. And always talking to you is incredible because you give me so much
You
inspiration
know,
myself.
I always think about all the things that I guess the reason I launched this channel was because of our father. Our father suffered with insulin resistance and then prediabetes and then full-blown diabetes. And so that's why I feel like our conversation today is going to matter so much because we're going to talk about insulin resistance. And why is that something that we all should be concerned about? Because I think it sounds to me like something that's hard to understand.
The thing too is when you say the word insulin resistance, it almost sounds like when you're talking about antibiotic resistance, that the insulin no longer works. The problem is that the pancreas is making so much insulin, it can't make any more. And the insulin it's making is not doing the job to cover the carbohydrates that you're consuming. And your carbohydrate intake is so overwhelming that the pancreas gets to a point where it maxes out. And then the insulin that's being excreted causes more damage by storing fat and putting fat in different parts of the body that you wouldn't think did insulin do. But the insulin, remember, the insulin does two things, or maybe
Yeah,
more.
that would be great. What is insulin?
Insulin is a peptide.
The
And what
peptide,
insulin
and it's a
does
hormone,
is
right?
it's in the class of hormone. They call it a peptide, so it's like a pre-hormone. So
Okay.
it actually is not really considered. It's called a peptide.
Oh,
Hormones really are secreted by a gland, like the insulin that's secreted by your pancreas is a human insulin that's specifically for you. But the insulin they give you is a peptide, like an enzyme. It's like a pre-enzyme that triggers a door to open, and that door opens another door, which unlocks a key to let the sugar in your cell membrane. And that's the only way of two ways that your sugar can get into the cell. There's only two ways. One is insulin. The other way is exercise. That's it. There's
really?
no other way to get sugar into the cell.
In other words, it's about expending energy, the human body's energy processing. Is
Well,
that
we
what?
want energy. We have to have
Right.
sugar in our
Right.
cells to
Mhm.
create ATP that
Right.
causes an action, the potential. Energy is needed for cell existence. You have
Right.
to have the sugar inside the cell membrane, inside it, so that the mitochondria can do its work and that the cell functions normally. And the brain cells are the most demanding cells, the
No
sugar
kidding.
level, and they will have it, the sugar level they want.
Right.
And turn on switches and hormones, and your liver will be making new sugars or genesis, and you will have the sugar level that your brain wants or your brain's
Because your
accustomed.
brain is really the big sucker of sugar.
Big organ.
It's
But what happens is the bigger organ is to step back from that and look at your lifestyle, how much processed food you're eating. And the first thing on the list about insulin resistance is these are the 10 things that causes insulin resistance. Okay.
okay.
The first one is increased intake in carbohydrates, like a carbohydrate overburden.
So that
And
means bread,
bread,
muffins,
processed foods. Here it is. You can talk
cookies,
sugar and
crackers.
fructose. Remember, sugar and fructose are the worst because they're metabolized by the liver only. And the liver is, for sugar, it is the most toxic kind of thing. But not only does it increase your sugar levels, I mean, your blood glucose levels high, but it also causes higher levels of insulin and a craving for more sugar. And it's like this vicious cycle because it's metabolized so quickly by the liver
When you eat a carbohydrate.
when you eat a sugar. Because a
Oh,
sugar,
when you eat
because
a
remember, there's
sugar.
differences in fructose and sugars, carbohydrates. Because they're simple and complex. And we get so many types of carbohydrates in processed foods, and our body's overwhelmed. Plus, you have foods that are high in glycemic
Index.
factors, processed foods, foods that are highly, what do they call it? hydrogenated or processed that you don't even know
Mhm.
the sugars in it because they concentrate a lot of the fructoses and sucroses, dextrose. They're concentrating them so that they can save space on storage and put them in the foods. And that's actually what we're consuming.
They're like this additive, maltodextrin. They're these additives that are and they're not really even identified as a sugar in the ingredients,
Right.
but it really, our body metabolizes it as a sugar.
Right.
So in other words, if you're consuming carbohydrates and you're consuming fruit, because that's fructose.
The other thing too, Rick, Kevin, is there are a lot of cultures that have been eating rice for centuries
Oh, I know.
because they're eating rice with processed foods and high fructose concentrated sugars. Now they're becoming obese. Because
Well,
they're
it's
eating
very
processed foods. So
interesting to look at. The Lancet came out with an article that said that the increase, because insulin resistance is a precursor to diabetes, there's been an increase of over 30% of diabetes since 1990. It's just
70%,
huge.
70% of the people with pre-diabetes will go on to develop type 2 diabetes.
70%?
70%, yes.
How
And
many
most
people
don't
will,
even know they have pre-diabetes.
so how many people will have insulin resistance and then develop pre-diabetes?
That's a good question because they don't really measure insulin levels.
That's the
And it's
problem.
based on blood sugar and all the
Oh,
measurements.
so everything is based on blood sugar.
Yeah. And even the American Diabetic Association, even the Mayo Clinic, even the Cleveland Clinic, when you look at pre-diabetes and treatment,
Mhm.
everything is based to get your blood sugar down, whether it's metformin or how to change it. But they don't talk about, they don't even want, they say follow a healthy diet. That's,
Nobody knows what that is.
and that's, and it's when they follow a healthy diet and exercise based
Yeah.
on physician's recommendations because
Right.
nobody wants to commit.
No,
But they
because
did say something about follow and consider a Mediterranean diet, a keto type diet, and intermittent fasting. They did mention that in the Cleveland.
oh, they did. Ketogenic, intermittent fasting.
Yeah, but everything
uh,
had to be prefaced with follow your doctor's recommendations. And a lot of
Yeah.
doctors don't even know how to talk about diet and exercise.
No, because let's face it, in medical school or in any kind of medical training, how much is diet and lifestyle factors taught to the team? Very little.
Most physicians don't like to talk about diabetes. Plus, it takes a lot of time to educate people. And that's something the physician feels like they don't have to do or shouldn't have to do.
It's something where I know when I learned that I was insulin resistant because I was having so much trouble with menopause. And my endocrinologist looked at me and she said, it's probably hard for us to tell that you're insulin resistant, except for the fact that you have this hormone disruption going on.
Wait till you hear some of the other factors that causes insulin resistance. The second factor is a fatty liver.
Fatty liver?
Fatty liver can cause insulin resistance. Yes.
But how do you get a fatty liver?
It interferes with the regulation of the excessive sugar caused by the fatty liver. They used to think it was related to alcohol or excessive food. But what happens is when insulin is at high levels,
Right.
stores fat in inappropriate places, one being the liver. So if you have a fatty liver, that interferes with the sugar regulation because that's what the liver does. It
Right.
makes new glucose or doesn't. And when you have
Right.
fatty liver, it interferes with that regulation.
So then the liver's not functioning properly.
Correct.
Wow.
The third thing is chronic stress, the cortisol levels.
Listen, I think we're all suffering from chronic stress, frankly, and that it's one of the biggest problems that we have stress from our job, stress in our community now because things are up in the air with our political system here in the United States.
Yep.
And then you have stress just in general from the many factors of dealing with life.
Yes.
You
Stress
know?
causes inflammation. And
Mhm.
inflammation is the next on the list that causes elevated insulin levels.
So how do we know that we're in that? To me is another thing. It's like this whole thing about inflammation. How do I know? I didn't know I was insulin resistant until I saw the endocrinologist. And then but I knew I had stress. I knew I had stress because the job I have has some stressful deadlines. And I think I had stress in my life because I was a caregiver for my husband for many years. And I wasn't surprised because also too, maybe in our family genetically, although no one lived very long in our family because of the heart disease, but with our father, he lived longer than his father,
The
you
stress
know?
causes more inflammation. Inflammation is the next on the list. Inflammation causes a interference of the signaling pathways. And if you have an inflamed pancreas,
Right. Wow.
which leads to worsening problems with producing more insulin or the adequate amounts of insulin or too much insulin. So there is a diabetes called type 1.5 diabetes where the pancreas is inflamed,
You're
yet
kidding.
pancreas is inflamed and it cannot. So that inflammation is causing your autoimmune system to attack it. And
I'll
it's
be
not,
darned.
it's right prior to developing type 1 diabetes.
So getting back to insulin resistance,
Here's the next one. You're going to die with the number 5. Number 5 is your microbiome.
that to me, I'm totally perplexed because how does your microbiome have a contribution
Well,
to
this
preserve?
guy just won a Nobel Prize for looking at the fat and skinny mice. They
Yeah,
transplanted the flora from the gut of skinny mice to fat mice, and all the mice became skinny.
you're kidding.
No, because a microbiome sends certain signaling
Hmm.
things through the gut flora that tells your body what to do. Plus, if you get an overgrowth of the bad bacteria like C. diff or
Right.
something, that increases inflammation and increases the process of your gut not functioning properly, which starts a whole other pathway of problems
Hmm.
with metabolizing sugars.
Wow.
And then more antibiotics, which causes more problems with your gut biome.
Wow.
Remember that your gut biome now they're finding out that there has a whole signaling process through it that we don't even know about, that we're just learning about.
Wow. So in other words, you're saying everything starts with what we put in our mouth.
The thing that's happening too is they've done stool or what's called fecal transplants, people with C. diff. And not only did it fix the C. diff, but if they were overweight, some of them actually lost weight.
Really?
Same thing that happened in the white mice.
Huh. I know that I feel my whole life I've had a hormone disruption. I think my challenges as a young person, getting so big and so heavy so early, that there was something already in some type of disruption. And because there was no really good way of handling it, because we just don't know what we don't know, I think it took me many years, and it's only now with the use of a GLP-1, GIP-1 inhibitor, the Monjaro. And I'm very good at my lifestyle challenges, let me tell you.
That's a
So
peptide too, so that works very well.
exactly.
Triggers certain things that do. The next one on the list of the 10 things that cause insulin resistance, the next one is sedentary lifestyle.
Yeah, that I think is the biggest thing for young people and people who get older. They're not moving as much. We're sitting at computers, we're sitting on
All
screens.
day, we're sitting playing
We're
videos. The kids are now playing these videos for 4 and
Yeah, they're not
not
doing
doing
any
any exercise. And now
physical.
I found out that even in the elementary and high school, they're not required to take PE or gym or anything.
No, all of that stuff that we used to do as kids outside that is part of athletics or physical exercise,
Completely
it is
gone.
not happening. But why is that?
They don't think it's important, and they think that if you do that, something you should do on your parents should do on your own outside of school.
Wow. See, to me, I think that I think we all had such an amazing structure around exercise from school because we learned about the top things that you should be able to do with your body. A certain amount of sit-ups and pull-ups and I don't know. I think there's other things that
Look at
people
what's happening in the army. They can't even enroll people in the army and some of the services because they're too overweight, they're too obese. They have to be able to run a mile in a certain
and they
time.
can't.
They have to be able to do certain physical things, and they can't get in because they're physically inept.
Yeah, because
The
we
next
don't
thing on the
have it.
list was interesting was genetics.
That I think was what worried me at the beginning because of daddy.
And
Oh,
then the thing is, not only is it genetics, but it's also a predisposition, but it's got a thing called epigenetics, is that
yes,
how you express those genes, whether or not
right.
you choose to be obese or whether you have this predisposition, but you choose to go down a path of allowing your body to be overweight, having a body mass index greater than such and such, or
Well,
when you're to have a sedentary life. So there are things we can modify and change.
that's what I've learned about epigenetics is that it's what you expose your body to and encourage in your life that is expressed in your body. And
Well, you
frankly,
always try to get in 10,000 steps a day, right?
I've
Okay.
tried to get in. I can get in a few steps, but I'm not good at 10,000.
No.
With my joints, with my hip joints and my knee joints, I'm good if I can get in 3,000, 4,000, and then to focus on movement in another way, like lifting a kettlebell, doing some isometric stuff so that I'm moving. And also, too, I'm very conscientious about not sitting for an hour or more without getting up. I'm moving around. But I have to say, the joint movement that I'm having problems with right now, it makes me very depressed that I can't move around. And I can't imagine how, as you get older and when you feel like your joints are really
That's funny because that's the next one on the list. Aging. Aging
aging.
is something you can't change. And
No,
then as you get older, your metabolic rate, your metabolism goes down,
down,
the level of hormones that
no
you need
matter what.
not as active as you were.
No,
And the
it's like
aging
a
process, you can't change that, but you can change how you express it.
that's, I think, the hard part is that there's this kind of continuum of, I don't feel good, so I don't do anything. Or I feel frustrated about my joints, and so I just don't do anything. And I think that happens a lot of times with older people is that, or if you have chronic pain syndrome like neuropathy, or you've got some other chronic pain, such as
Look
joint.
at what's on the next on the list.
What?
Poor quality or inadequate sleep. Because that's what
Well,
happens to me. I keep thinking, oh, I just didn't sleep good. I need more sleep. I just need more sleep. And
right.
what it is a poor quality sleep. You really need
You're
a
being
good 60
restless.
hours of good sleep, not uninterrupted sleep like I've been. I've actually here, now that I'm here, Denver, I've been sleeping better than I have in months, primarily because my hip's not hurting.
Yeah, because
And
then
doing physical therapy here than I would have done at home. There's a staircase here. I've been going up and down the stairs, up and down the stairs. So I'm
okay,
exhausted. So
but
we
that's a
just,
good thing.
it's a good thing. So I've had better sleep here than I've had in a while.
Okay,
But that
because
good quality
you're
sleep,
moving more.
yeah, moving more. But remember, sleep and adequate sleep and good quality sleep lowers your cortisol levels because you're
Right.
dealing with that stress while you're sleeping. You're dealing with that stress. It brings your cortisol levels down,
Mhm.
which brings your sugar level down, which brings your insulin level. Everything has like a domino effect.
So in other words, stress equals cortisol equals increased sugar, increased insulin, and so it's just this
The
kind of
next on the
ripple.
list is medications. So if
Yeah.
you take steroids,
Yeah,
you're on
steroids.
hormones, going down the beta blockers and statins.
Really?
Certain diuretics cause elevated insulin levels. Yes.
So,
I didn't know that for a fact.
so if you're hypertensive and you're on a beta blocker,
It can cause
it
increased
could
insulin.
cause wow, I had no idea.
So it's get statins too. Statin can increase you. They didn't know that. They just found this out not too long ago. And also
Wow.
hormones, birth control. That's why people with taking birth control gain weight.
So is that why sometimes people who are pregnant get insulin issues or they
Well,
get
that's more
diet?
gestational
Oh,
diabetes. That's a whole nother ballpark. And that it has because of what the child is causing your mom to the mother.
oh,
But
okay.
even some of the drugs that are antipsychotic, trying to think of the Zyprexa,
Oh,
which
really?
is used
Zyprexa.
not only in psychosis, but it's used for people with chemotherapy for nausea and vomiting, even in low doses.
Whoa.
But it can cause elevated insulin levels.
Huh. That's interesting. And then, so how do we
Can you
as
hold on one second?
yeah, we can.
Domingo, that's loud. Okay, you got it.
Okay. So that, how can we, I think, then how can we as adults and even for younger people, how can we figure out what it is that we need to prioritize? Because I tell you what, I feel like
think you
sometimes
know-
it's overwhelming.
The first thing you do, and let's just get through this list.
Yeah. What's the last
10th one, the 10th and last one was medications. And we
medication?
talked for that. But I think if you take this simple test
What
and
test
look
is
at
that?
your age, weight,
Right.
and look at what your last blood sugar was,
Okay.
your waistline, or your
Okay.
waist is to your height ratio. And what was the other thing? The other question. It was like a 4-question thing. She had 5 questions to take a 2-minute pre-diabetes questionnaire. She asked you your age. Were you on any hypertensive medications? Were you taking any blood glucose medications? You exercise? What was your height and weight? They calculate your BMI, and what was your waist size?
And this all can give you some risk
And
determination.
yeah, so when you answer to those simple questions, the number of yeses, you have a high probability of having prediabetes.
Because I have to say, when I saw the percentages of people who are insulin resistant who become pre-diabetic is high.
It's the whole thing just blew me away. The global numbers of the cost is staggering. It's in the trillions.
Yeah, because
The
frankly,
number 70 to 80% are indirectly, because of diabetes, having cardiovascular problems,
right.
strokes, heart
Yep.
problems because of diabetes, and kidney problems.
So how is that? Because of the sugar?
It's because they're only focusing on that one aspect of treating diabetes. You look at the American Diabetic Association, and all they talk about is blood sugar. They don't talk about, and even look at the commercials. They're playing all these Ozempic commercials, all these other
Right.
commercials. They're
It's
not
all about
everything's
right.
centered around food. If you look
Right.
at them, every commercial, they're focused. They're all eating. They're eating at a restaurant. They're eating. She's making food in the house. There's not one time do you see them exercising.
Movement is key, right?
Yeah, movement is key. And not one time do you see them eating fresh fruit. They're always eating. And they're not exercising or just walking even. They're always eating. Watch the commercials, you'll see.
I will see, because I think always, something, I always have suspicion that many of these American heart foundations and diabetes are all in cahoots with the food production companies.
There's not a lot of profit margin in food and in food distribution and food, like restaurants and food purchases. There's not a big profit margin. So they have to start doing stuff like air backing stuff, sealing stuff, preserving stuff, so that they can transfer food here and there, and it's not perishable. Because once you have perishable food, that's the food loss. There's your profit right there.
There goes your profit.
So
Yeah.
things like, if you think about all the restaurants you've eaten in the last week, how many of them have fresh farm to table food? Very few.
Yeah.
Most everything is packaged, shipped in, air sealed, frozen, radiated, or preserved.
Yep.
And that's
Especially
what
if you're getting stuff from the fast food industry, or even not even like the fast food, even those places that are like Applebee's and these places that are just Panera Bread.
Did you say these names or not? Panera, Applebee's,
I mean, I just
Carrabba's, all these restaurants, none of them, the only thing they serve fresh, we're gathering, is the lettuce, something in the salad, and that's
the
it.
salads.
Everything
So
else is
everything else comes packaged.
steak, the chicken, everything's frozen,
And
everything's air sealed, irradiated,
Yep.
preserved, or
All about consistency too, because they really want you to have the same type of food from that restaurant that might be in Texas as it would be the one here in New York, that you're getting the same quality of foods. And so there's some level of centralized preservation of all that
it's
food.
the same thing that happened to the bread in our country.
Yep.
But he wants a fast, quick rise, quick, fast bread.
So they
and you
can
can't do that.
get it on the shelf and it's preserved and you don't have to worry about
yeah,
it.
and so that it doesn't mold quickly. And
Doesn't
normal
mold.
bread falls within a day or two.
Yeah, it goes bad fast. I think, but how do we, again, so where do we start? Do we start with our food, or do we
I
start
think
with our
the first thing to start with is knowing where you're at. A lot of people don't know they're diabetic for years before they even get to the doctor. So
Think about
ask your
it.
questions. Are you overweight?
Yeah.
Do you exercise regularly? They want you to exercise not 5 days a week now, not 4 or 3 or whatever. They want you exercising at work. If you have an hour lunch, they want you to
Go
exercise
walk.
at least 15 minutes of it.
Yeah.
They want you walking twice a day, 10,000 steps at least every day. Blah. And they want you to know what your BMI is, what your blood pressure.
But I get frustrated about the whole BMI thing, because seriously, I now have a BMI of 30, I think, which is still high.
Not
And
much. You're right over the edge.
I know, but still I'm high. And so once you meet this BMI thing, no matter what your muscle is, because I have to say,
Not looking at the muscle mass.
They don't care about the muscle mass.
It's just the body mass index.
But that
And that's
doesn't
really
make
doesn't
sense
concept.
to me. So let me just understand. I could go, and that's what happened with me. I went for years not knowing I was insulin resistant. Years. I don't think I found out until I was in my 50s because I was having trouble due to menopause that I was potentially insulin resistant and probably had a diagnosis of
Were you
polycystic.
insulin resistant and pre-diabetic at the same time?
No, I've never had any pre-diabetes. I've always been about 5.6, 5.5, 5.4, just hovering there. It was really the issue around not being able to lose weight, no matter what. And then just this whole,
What was your calorie consumption? Were
so
you consuming, you were consuming that much, were you?
my calorie consumption has always been pretty consistent, somewhere between
This
1600.
metabolism was what?
I just learned my metabolism is 1430.
And I don't think any people know what their metabolism is right now.
No, and now I know. And so my calorie consumption now, before I even found out, my calorie consumption has always been about 1600 to 1700 calories. So only taking that drug Manjaro helped me lose weight.
So when you had the calorie, your metabolic rate just developed, or
Measured.
what is it now?
So my calorie
Basal.
baseline, if I do nothing, is 1430 calories. And that even if I were to just be moderately active, still not enough to lose weight unless I were like super active. So in order for me to lose weight, I have to maintain a calorie deficit somewhere between
Over
15
2,000.
No,
What?
I need to eat. I cannot consume food above 15 to 1600 calories.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. I should always be in a 200 to 300 calorie above what my baseline is.
But you did a lot of interval fasting, didn't you?
I do still. I still don't eat until afternoon. I still don't eat from 8 until noon the next day. I do that. I still focus on eating foods that are high in protein. So
Do you ever check your sugar randomly throughout the day?
I haven't, but I'm going to start doing that because now I'm feeling this drop in blood sugar and it feels weird. And it feels all of a sudden I'm nauseous. And so that's why I'm wondering, as I'm modifying my body with less weight on my body and more protein, and maybe because I do take metformin, I'm wondering if I need to reduce that dose.
Metformin really does, just all it does is extend the time that you have pre-diabetes. Actually, that's the only treatment they have for pre-diabetes other than exercise and diet metabolism.
Well, they gave it to me for PCOS.
Oh, I see.
The woman the endocrinologist I saw, she initially put me on 2,000 milligrams of metformin for PCOS.
Won't you take it 1,000 twice a day?
Yeah, it was a lot. But I'm now at just 500 in the morning, 500 at night.
You probably see you even cut down on that.
I think, you know what? I think so because of this nausea and strange feeling I'm getting now in the morning. Even though I haven't eaten anything, I've had just black coffee and some water.
You get lightheaded or dizzy or blurred
I
vision?
get nauseous feeling. I get a nausea, like a sudden overwhelming nausea, but then it goes away. Although the other day it stayed. And I think it's just hard to know when you have a predisposition in your family like we do. And then I discovered I had insulin resistance late in life. And how would you test for that if you were not knowledgeable? Is there a test?
The one thing is you'd have to look at your weight, look at your intake, caloric intake, look at what your fasting glucose is every day for a week. If it ever is above 126 randomly, that's concerning. Fasting blood sugar.
If you're just randomly taking your blood sugar and you haven't eaten for 2 hours, if it's above 100,
greater than 126, on 2 occasions, that's considered diabetes.
Really? Just randomly taking
being
it?
released, because
Really?
that's concerning because you're supposed to, your body's sugar level is well controlled. And that's why I was saying, usually if you check an insulin level on a person that's insulin sensitive, the
Mhm.
insulin levels are usually just 0 to 3 or 4.
Really?
Yeah. And so as soon as you jump up to hemoglobin A1C to 5.5, 5.6, or was it? And yeah, I'm a big,
Well, they say you're pre-diabetic at 5.7.
so it starts at 5.7 on the radar. 6, you're diabetic. So the thing is that the level of insulin you made, even with that, just because if you check, if you were pre-diabetic or if your sugar is going up, it won't be a real big jump in sugar, but it will definitely be a big jump in insulin levels from 5.5 to 5.6 to 5.7. There's a big jump in insulin level.
Oh,
But they just, for some reason, I don't know if random insulin levels are difficult to do or they're expensive. I don't know. They just don't teach
they
doing it.
don't measure that.
You can.
Really?
You can, yeah, you can measure random insulin levels. What happened was we got stuck on this glucose tolerance test and how you metabolize, and everything was still based on blood sugars because that's how they treat diabetes.
So how can I help myself if you think that you have a risk, you're overweight or you're not moving as much? How can I help myself reverse this insulin?
It's reversible. And the first thing you have to do is consult with your physician. You have to work with a physician, a dietitian, maybe a trainer, a life coach, many things if you really want to reverse. And you can, it may take some time because it didn't develop overnight either.
No. So it's a lot of people.
Following Catherine, is that by the time most people realize they're pre-diabetic or diabetic, they're already obese, sedentary lifestyle. They've developed habits that are really unhealthy. It's a great majority of people in this country.
Yeah, I know.
70% of the people of our population is pre-diabetic and will go on to develop diabetes.
I know. It's pretty
It's $1 trillion
discouraging.
cost.
Yeah. It's a pretty discouraging thing. And I think that's why so many people who have diabetes, who've had it reversed because they've been able to take this drug, Ozempic, or
It's why people who go and have drastic measures like a stomach bypass, the real stomach bypass, not just a zip or whatever,
right, the whole pouch.
the whole thing. When they go to them, they drastic measure and lose that drastic weight, they come off all their meds. And so they thought, wait, this is reversible. Pre-diabetes, all this is reversible. Yes, because they did drastic things to lose the weight and decrease the amount of sugar levels circulating in their blood.
And so that's primarily the thing. It's like, how much sugar are you consuming?
They want you to should consume very little. It was like 3 grams, but very little sugar.
Really?
Yeah, 3 to 5 grams. And usually there's 5 grams in a sip of something. It was unbelievably low.
Well, that's
The problem is, like, you got to decide and make some real choices, and people aren't willing to sit down and make good, healthy choices because healthy choices are time consuming, thought provoking, and costly. And that's the big problem. Everybody's in our country wants something quick. They want a quick fix. They want something to work. They want, like, for you, like, for instance, Manjaro works, right?
Yeah, let me tell you. But I intentionally did it much slower than my doctor
The thing is,
wanted me to.
you knew that it was going to be more than you had tried many other things. This has been the best adjunct treatment for you.
My gosh, Noel.
Exercise and activity and diets.
Huge. This is huge for me. I'm at a weight I haven't been at since college.
And seeing that results also encourages you to continue because you've been discouraged how many times?
So many times. I think part of the problem is when I was younger and the way that I was managed by the medical field, I felt a big blame that I caused this to myself.
The first thing that the clinician wants to say is you need to lose weight. But then you explain how.
When you feel like you caused it, oh my God, I had an eating party. And that's what put all the weight on. And so you feel a little sense of, okay, I'm causing this. And then there became this huge kind of vigilance on what is Mary Catherine eating. And so when somebody's watching you eat, you get overly sensitive. And so you start hiding what you eat.
Especially if you enjoy food.
Of course. Oh my God, I'm a big foodie. That's the
And
problem.
so, that becomes a big issue.
Yeah.
And it's so multifaceted, you wouldn't even believe. So
Oh, I
you
do. I
you
think
have to
that
find a clinician or dietitian or an exercise trainer or a lifestyle trainer or life coach that's going to work with you, that puts a plan, an action plan, and you follow the action plan, and you really want to reach those goals. The other thing too is you need to monitor your goals and how you're progressing
right.
and watching that. And if you do see progress, it's healthy. But people, they lose faith, or they lose interest, or they lose their motivation. That's why I always ask people, what motivates you? What motivates you to continue this?
I think the only thing that kind of keeps me going is I have this sense of tracking. I like to track things. And so I track my weight, I track my heart, my blood pressure, I track my food, I track my protein, I'm tracking my carbs, my
You
sugar.
track your sleep, how much you sleep.
I'm not doing that, but what I'm thinking of doing is I'm going to get one of those rings.
Who?
There's these things. There's something called the Aura ring
What is that?
or a Whoop. There's these two types of rings that will tell you about your sleep. And so I read the Aura ring is excellent for women to help you relate to what your sleep habit or your sleep cycle is. And they give you like how rested you feel, it gives you data. So I've got an Aura ring I'm going to start wearing. And you put it on like your either index finger or your third finger, and you wear it, and apparently it gives you a lot of the things that your Apple Watch does, except it's a ring. It gives
Do you
you
wear a face mask?
no.
Do you
I
have a
don't.
noisemaker or white noise maker?
Yeah, I have a white noise maker.
I have to sleep with a white noise maker.
Yeah, that helps a lot. But I think a lot of it has to do with my hormones. I'm sleeping a little bit better now that I'm taking
You've
this.
never slept well, have you?
No, never. I never have slept well. I've always had trouble going to sleep, waking up too
I think
soon.
there might be some correlation to the excessive weight it made.
No, I think some of it has to do with an overactive mind. It's very hard for me to turn off the thinking. That's always the problem. So I guess the thing is that what if you don't have money for any of this kind of accountability tools? What can you do then? I feel challenged because behavioral change is some of the most difficult things.
It's
And
funny though, when you look at the countries with the poorest levels of income and the level of poverty, if you look at India, you see
they
so
do fine.
few obese person.
Yeah,
Look at Africa, so few obese.
I know.
I sometimes go to some of the Caribbean islands. You don't see any people obese. And actually, if you take a real good look at it, look at pictures of the beaches from the 1940s and 50s with people on the beach, and then look
Yes,
at the
they're a lot
beach
slender,
now in this
more
country.
slender.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, the size of our bodies have changed
Our morphology has
drastically.
changed dramatically.
Yeah,
These young
exactly.
kids go out on the beach and their bellies like huge.
I
And
know.
it's
That's
because
the
of,
thing
I
that
mean,
troubles me the most is our young people are becoming diabetics at such a
at
young
such an early
age.
age.
Yeah.
And it's almost like they're set up for failure.
And yeah, we haven't
And
really
look at what
felt.
some of these kids are eating. Cinnamon, some of the cereals are just so full of sugar. Oh,
Oh my God, no. Listen, between that and some of the sugary drinks, it's unreal. 30 and 40 grams of sugar in a product.
that's
That
one of the
just
reasons
to me
why father
is
was.
yeah, we all know how much Daddy loved ice Cokes.
You
You know,
like
the icy
Coca-Cola? Yeah.
icy cold Coca-Colas. And he would drink those like what, 8, 9,
Like it
10
was
a day.
water.
And so you just can't do that to your body. And I think it's challenging because there is this addictiveness to these products. You know, you crave sugar.
So I think if you look at these 10 possible indicators of hyperinsulinemia and look at your weight, look at your age, look at your waist size, look at the medications you take or the diet you're following, and really analyzing, am I consuming too many carbohydrates? Am I not exercising enough? Am I pre-diabetic? That's one of the first questions you have to ask yourself. And remember,
Or even am I at risk of being a pre-diabetic?
what is my family genetics? Don't even think about it until it's over, until it's too late.
I know. I tell you something, that's when I've talked to people who've come to us to talk about neuropathy because they have diabetes or they didn't know they had diabetes and they come in because they've got the pain in their feet. And that's what's so upsetting is that we suddenly discover they're diabetic.
Well, it's not only the same thing happens that they didn't know they were hyperinsulinemic, they didn't know they were pre-diabetic, and they didn't know the damage that sugar can do to the kidney.
And I remember how much it finally dawned on our father when he lost the vision in that one eye about the fact that this was a result of the diabetes. I think that disconnection between how you had the risk of diabetes has this horrible risk of causing
Cardiovascularly,
so many
kidney, liver,
problems. I know.
because there's nothing that it keeps us from, because you can continue to consume carbohydrates and sugars with no significant, like you don't pass out. If you're drinking alcohol, you pass out sooner or later. If you're doing drugs or other things, you pass out sooner or later. You can't only just, but you can consume sugar all day long.
And you don't feel it right away unless your sugars are under control or not in control, and then you pass out because your glucose is so.
Think conscientiously. I don't think a lot of people even are aware of how much sugar is in stuff.
You know, I agree with you because when I see people drink some of the coffee drinks that are available
Oh
now,
my gosh. With the whipped cream on top?
remember when we used to drink some of those? And now we've got a little smarter. We're realizing that those were deadly drinks.
Tons of calories, yeah.
Because it's not only just the calories. This is something sometimes you will in your mind think, oh, I can splurge right now. But I think the problem is it's not so much splurging. It's about the fact that we're not really conscious to truly how much sugar is in stuff that we eat and
Like
drink.
2 sips and that's enough.
It's unreal.
Yeah, it's unreal.
It's really unreal. So I guess the first place you could start is just getting a good doctor to work with you.
And that's hard. That's even hard to do there. I think, thank God that there's a lot of on the internet. There's a lot of things that are good information, but there's a lot of bad information. But the first thing you have to do is some simple things like, how much carbohydrates am I consuming? How old am I? What's my weight? What's my BMI? What's my blood pressure? What was my last blood sugar? Some of these simple things. Am I having blurred vision?
Yeah.
Am I having thirst all the time? Am I hungry? These are symptoms of prediabetes.
Yeah. And also too, I think fatigue, that's another one that people talk about is having this ongoing fatigue that you're suffering from.
Yeah, and we'll talk about that later.
Yeah. So I think for me, when I learned that I was PCOS, I think it was a real light bulb moment. And it helped me stay more diligent to my diet and exercise because I realized that some things were not under my control. Is that some things about my body and how it interacts with food and movement is not always something I can control. And so if I wanted to control anything, I had to control like the number of calories or the quality of those calories so that I was getting more protein and fiber than anything. And I think that has changed a lot since I've lost all the weight. I've lost almost 50 pounds in the past year and a half.
Such a huge number of people going on these PGL1s.
They're GLP-1, GIP.
GLP-1, and because they get some effect.
Yes.
You see some results when for years, they've been pounding for years.
Oh, yeah. And this, for the first time, there's a twofold thing for me. For the first time ever with these two drugs on board, I'm actually conscientious of this feeling of satisfied eating, feeling a sense of satiety after I've eaten something. And for the first time, I'm like, I really can't eat another bite. And so that's really huge in my mind. So that's gotten me a little bit better. I think also, too, there's this, when you grow up with such a fixation on we're watching everything you eat, and you're watching everything you eat, somehow you just have food on the mind. And with this drug,
Commercials. There's food
with this drug,
commercials.
I don't even think about food as much. This
Really?
drug has really helped defocus, or it helps me refocus things, which is really amazing. So even though I'm aware I'm insulin resistant, I'm working on things to change that because I really don't want to become pre-diabetic.
It's easy to happen and it's reversible.
Yeah. And it's reversible by changing your diet, being intentional about how much sugar and carbohydrates you consume,
Exercising,
and are you moving enough every day?
moving,
Yeah.
getting adequate sleep.
And sleep and reducing your stress.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
I think those are things we're all working to do. So thank you so much,
You're
my
welcome.
brother.
I've enjoyed
I
this.
love talking about these things because I think it gets complicated. And
Oh,
please,
it can be complicated. It can be, it's layers, and it may take more than many times of your self-evaluation and self-insight to really determine what is it that you need. And maybe
yeah,
many
to
things.
get you to be accountable, because sometimes it does feel overwhelming.
But
So please,
the long-term effects of diabetes is devastating.
it is devastating. You're right. It's devastating and it's a real life changer. And so we want to help people become more aware of what insulin resistance is, how we can prevent it. And we know that if you're insulin resistant, very high level percentage of those people become diabetic. So please, if you're on the YouTube channel and you've stumbled on my channel, please think about subscribing. We'd love to have you here every Thursday and Sunday at Healthy by George to help us learn to grow older and stay healthier into our older age. Bye-bye. So thank you so much for joining me at Healthy by George. I hope you found the information inspiring and that it encourages you on your wellness journey. Because remember, your body, your well-being are our most precious gift, and every tiny action taken daily can make a huge difference. I hope the information here is educational purposes and is not meant to replace your medical care. See your doctor and talk about what works for you. If you enjoyed today's content, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. Your support means the world to me, and it helps me continuing creating content that inspires and empowers you to live your best life. Goodbye for now, and join me again at the next Healthy by George.